For several years between the late 1970s and the early 1980s, obtaining a personal computer program did not mean installing a file or purchasing a ready-made physical medium. Very often, it meant manually copying the code. This practice is not a folkloric detail in the history of computing. It is a structural phase tied to specific technical, economic, and cultural conditions. Understanding it makes it possible to better grasp what a personal computer originally was and what kind of relationship it required from its users. At the beginning of the personal computer era, available memory was extremely limited. RAM was measured in kilobytes, not megabytes. Storage media were slow, fragile, and not always available. Digital distribution, as we understand it today, simply did not exist. In this context, specialized magazines played a central role. They were not only sources of information, but also channels for software distribution. Programs were published as listings, sequences of instructions printed on paper, often spanning many pages. The assumption was clear. The computer was considered a tool for users willing to interact directly with its internal logic. The process was simple, only in appearance. The reader typed the code line by line, respecting every character. A minimal error could compromise the entire program. In some cases, the language was relatively readable, such as BASIC. In others, the code was written directly in machine language, represented by numerical sequences devoid of intuitive meaning. Once typing was complete, the program could be saved to cassette or disk. However, if the computer crashed before saving, all the work was lost and had to be started again from the beginning. This fragility was not a marginal flaw. It was an integral part of the experience. It is easy to interpret this practice as a form of sacrifice or technological backwardness. In reality, it reflects a different conception of software. The program was not perceived as an autonomous object, separate from the user. It was something that took shape through direct action. Typing the code meant traversing its structure, even without fully understanding it. It was not only about obtaining a functional result, but about participating in the process that made the computer operational. The boundary between use and construction was less distinct than it is today. This historical phase shows that technology does not evolve only by increasing power or convenience. The type of competence required and the cognitive relationship with the tool also change. Today, software is opaque. It works without asking anything of the user. At the time, functioning required attention, time, and tolerance for error. This does not make that period better or worse. It makes it different and useful to study in order to understand how the very idea of the user took shape. Manually copying code was not an isolated curiosity, but a coherent response to a specific technical ecosystem. Observing it today makes it possible to question how much accessibility has altered our relationship with the internal functioning of technologies. Not to mourn a lost complexity, but to ask what we gain and what we stop seeing when the experience is not completely transparent anymore.